Greetings to our online reviewees from more than 60 countries in 6 continents. This is Ervin Temporal, the founder and CEO of 9.09er. We established this company in 2007, and after 15 years, we have helped thousands of examinees in acing the required English examination for their visa application. Like you guys, I am not a native English speaker. In fact, English is my third language. Coming from the southern part of the Philippines, my first language is Bisaya. My second language, Tagalog, which is the national language of the Philippines. And my third language, English. However, this did not stop me from acing the examination. In fact, I took the IELTS twice. One with British Council, one with IDB. I took one academic module and one general training module. But as you can see, I got a perfect 9 in listening, 9 in reading, 9 in speaking, 8 in writing. Because we are non-native speakers, we know your needs. That's why we're going to share with you the effective test-taking strategies that help us in getting the perfect 9 in the IELTS. Hopefully, whatever we're going to talk about for this lecture will also help you in reaching your dream. Let us begin with the listening subtest. So listening is usually the first subtest in the written exams. It's just that there are instances when listening does not come first, only when there is a technical difficulty in the recording. This is the only instance when the test supervisor decides to start with reading or writing. However, if there are no technical problems or difficulties, listening always comes first. Now, listening is exactly the same for academic and general training candidates. It's only in reading and writing where there are major differences between the two. But since listening is the same for all IELTS examinees, we're not going to talk about the different modules in the first subtest, which is listening. Listening is divided into 4 parts of varying difficulty. So what exactly is the meaning of the word varying? One section is usually easier than the other, and there are certain parts which are more challenging. Based on my experience in the last 15 years of teaching IELTS and operating 9.09er, we have noticed that the first section is usually the easiest, while the fourth section or the fourth part is the most challenging. What did we notice? As parts progress, the difficulty also increases. Now, what about the number of points allotted for the listening test? In one part, there are usually 10 points. If you do the mathematics, grand total of 40 points for the entire listening subtest. But a lot of people are asking, so what grade am I supposed to get in the IELTS? Later, we're going to talk about the required band scores. FYI, IELTS is not a pass or fail examination. In fact, the moment you get hold of your IELTS result, it won't tell you, well, congratulations, you passed the IELTS. Or your IELTS result won't tell you, we're sorry, better luck next time. Because IELTS is not like that. FYI, when you apply for a visa, there is a different band score requirement from one type of visa to another. Say, for instance, immigrant visa applicants or working visa applicants are usually required higher marks as compared to fiancé or spouse visa applicants. Talking about the time allotment for the listening subtest, it's usually divided into 2. You're given 30 minutes to listen to the recording and answer the questions. At the same time, you are given 10 extra minutes to transfer the answers from the test booklet to the answer sheet. This is usually the case for IELTS on paper. It's just that for IELTS on computer, obviously, there is no answer sheet. That is why for IELTS on computer, some test supervisors decide not to give the candidates 10 extra minutes to transfer the answers. So what is it that these test supervisors do? They are going to give you approximately 2 minutes to review your work. After that, they move on to the next subtest, which is reading. Now, why is there a need to transfer the answers? It's simply because when you are taking IELTS on paper, it is best that you write directly on the test booklet. Sometimes there are erasures. Well, human as we are, we commit mistakes when we are taking down notes. It is best that you transfer the answers later on because you're given enough time to review your work. Earlier, I talked about the required band scores. I know for a fact that a lot of people are taking the examination without a specific destination in mind. In fact, the others, somewhere along the way, decide to change from one type of visa application to another. So, to help you out, what I did was to categorize the required band scores based on the profession, based on the destination, and the type of visa that you're applying for. So let's begin with skilled workers. Who are the skilled workers? Usually butchers, welders, electricians, linemen, mechanics, and the like. If you're going to Canada, employers usually require CLB or Canadian Language Benchmark 4. That means to say a 4.5 in listening, a 3.5 in reading, 4 in writing, 4 in speaking. If you are going to the United Kingdom as a skilled worker, IELTS for UKVI or United Kingdom visas and immigration usually require a grade of 4.0 for IELTS General Training Module. However, if you are a skilled worker going to Australia or New Zealand, it's usually the employer that tells you the required band score. Based on my experience since 2007, Australian and New Zealand employers usually require 4.0 to 6.0. That is what's my homework for skilled workers. Double check with your recruitment agency or your employer what grade they need you to get in the examination. Let's move on to the next category. Immigrant visa application. Like skilled workers, for immigrant visa, it's on a case-to-case basis depending on the destination. One thing I've noticed though, for Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, the higher score you get in IELTS, the higher immigration points they are going to give you. So that means to say, more chances for you to be invited. There is no such thing as fixed passing score for immigrant visa application, but the suggestion is for you to aim for 7 to 8 in the IELTS. It doesn't mean that you failed in the examination if you get lower than that. It's just that if you get 7 to 8, definitely you're going to earn more immigration points. And this will entice the visa officers to consider your immigrant visa application. Moving on to the third category, student visa applicants. Well, like the first two, this one is on a case-to-case basis. But because I've been doing this for nearly half of my life, now I have an idea what scores are usually required depending on the kind of degree that you're applying for. So if you're applying for a bachelor's degree or a diploma course, most of the time they are going to require you 5.5 to 6. There are certain applications, say for instance, master's degree that require 6.5 to 7.0. But if you're applying for PhD, it's usually 7 to 7.5. But don't be surprised if Ivy League universities require you to get an 8. Nurses and health workers are obviously part of a large chunk of IELTS candidates taking the examination worldwide. Now let's take a look at the required band score for nurses. Those going to the United States of America applying for visa screen need to get a 7 in speaking and 6.5 overall band score, regardless of the grades in listening, reading, and writing. That means to say, even if a nurse gets 5.5 in listening, this nurse can still migrate to the United States, provided that the overall band score is 6.5. Having said that, what is the recommended band score in listening to get 6.5 overall? If you get a 7 in speaking, 6 in listening, 6 in reading, 6 in writing, that will give you 6.5 overall band score. But like what I've said, don't worry too much if you get 5.5 in one component. It could be in listening, reading, or writing, for as long as there is one subtest that's going to pull you up. At the end of the day, you only look at your speaking and overall band score if you're going to the United States. Nurses going to UK, Australia, and New Zealand must strive for a grade of 7 in listening. What about Ireland? Well, Republic of Ireland is relatively flexible. Why? Because they need you to get 7 in 3 subtests and 6.5 in 1 subtest. So if ever it's in listening where you got 6.5, that means to say a grade of 27 over 40. FYI though, The band score equivalents are not fixed. I have attended various workshops in the last 15 years of teaching IELTS. In fact, I was sent by the Philippines to the International Conference of English Language Assessment in Shanghai, China in 2017, where I met the big bosses of IELTS in Asia. And there I found out that the level of difficulty is usually the one that determines the band score equivalent, which means to say, if the material is difficult, then the band score equivalents are lower. But if the material is easy, that's when the band score equivalents are higher. I need you to look at 7.0. You will see here it's 30 to 32. But how come, you're going to ask, how come they won't give us a definite score, like I'm supposed to get 30 or 32? Applying the logic that I have shared earlier, it's this simple. If the material is difficult, they adjust 7. So that's when 7 becomes 30 over 40. But if the material is easy, that's when they do the necessary adjustment. That's when they make it 7. That's when they make 7 32 out of 40. Some people after the examination say, you know what, I felt that was too easy, so I'm sure I'm going to make it in the examination. Well, don't be too complacent, because when it's easy, band score equivalents are higher. But some people feel bad after taking the examination, and that's when they say, I think I won't make it anymore because the material was too difficult. Well, it might be a blessing in disguise, because that's when they adjust the band score equivalents. In the Philippines, the candidates usually get high scores in the listening subtest. So you will notice here that the expected median Niner level is an 8.0. So if our reviewees have gotten an average of 8.0 in listening in the last 15 years, we are certain that the test-taking strategies I'm going to share with you in future presentations will help you not just in getting an 8 in listening, but who knows, you might get a 9 in listening. You might be wondering, where did we get the term 9.09er? Apparently, the perfect score in the examination is 9. And the term niner is being given to an examinee who gets 9.0 in at least one of the 4 subtests in the IELTS. And knowing that listening is the easiest of them all, the moment you get a 9 in listening, you can call yourself a niner and you can announce to the whole wide world, hey, I'm a niner in IELTS in the listening subtest. You will notice here in the band score transmutation table, I ended at 5.0. It does not mean that 5.0 is the lowest in the IELTS. The lowest is 1.0. But how come I did not share with you the band score equivalents of 4.5 to 1.0? Well, one thing's for sure, we are not expecting any 9.09er reviewee to get 4.5 or lower. At the same time, we don't want you to be satisfied with 4.5. Even if you're only required 4, we need you to aim for a higher band score. For personal gratification, for self-bragging rights, you can inform everyone, your friends, even if I'm required a low score, I got a decent score in the examination, or I actually got a high band score, even if I'm only required 4.0 or 4.5. Now, let us take a look at the listening as a subtest. Listening, as they say, is considered the easiest of them all. But why the easiest? Imagine you're not going to construct sentences. Number 2, you're not going to write paragraphs. And the best part of them all the answers are mentioned by the speaker. So that means to say you don't have to think of the answer anymore. But even if it's the easiest, this is not a giveaway. There will be challenges along the way. And what challenges am I talking about? Number 1 is accent. And number 2 is speed. So let's talk about the 2 of them. What do we mean when we say accent? Most of the time, it pertains to the manner of delivery. And this is usually affected by the native tongue or the regional orientation. A common misconception in the IELTS, people are thinking, oh, only the native accents come out in the IELTS. In fact, some people think that only the British accent comes out in the examination. I'd like to remind you, though, that in the acronym IELTS, letter I stands for international. An important lesson that I've learned when I met more than 20 examiners in my last 15 years of teaching IELTS. The word international is a reminder that you will encounter native speakers and non-native speakers in the IELTS. So don't be surprised if you encounter a non-British speaker. Say, for instance, it could be a Western European speaker, an Asian speaker, a Black speaker, or Latino speaker talking in English with their local accent. So that's number one, unfamiliarity with the accent. The second problem that we have identified in the listening subtest, speed. And what is the meaning of speed? There are two possible contexts. Number one, some speakers talk too fast, such that it is quite difficult to catch up with what they're saying. Or number two, these speakers may not talk too fast, however, they give the answers one after another. Having said this one, we need you guys to think of unfamiliarity with the accent, and we need you to deal with the speed, because if you're able to address these two concerns, then listening will be a breeze. That's why 9.09er has recommended the following remedies. And what's number one? We need you to listen to audio recordings all day long, even if you don't answer the practice tests yet. Why? Because it all starts with familiarity. Familiarity is the one that bridges the gap. So I know that you guys are busy people, but during your free time, instead of watching movies or instead of singing songs with a foreign language, I need you to expose yourself to different types of recordings. Say, for instance, you are cooking. While you're cooking, your background music could be Listening Part 1. This is a practice listening test which resembles the International English Language Testing System. Or, say for instance, you're doing the laundry. While you're doing the laundry, instead of playing some instrumental music as your background, you can actually play some of your listening recordings. Say for instance, you're doing the laundry and your background music is Part 1. You'll be given time to listen to the recording and answer the questions. Why are we recommending that you have to listen to these all the time? Simple logic. If you don't want to look at something, what do? Close your eyes, you can't see it anymore. But if you don't want to listen to something, simply you don't have a choice, because we do not have earlids. Even if we don't like it, we have no choice, but we can hear it. Now, when you become familiar, eventually you won't have issues with comprehension, because comprehension usually follows after familiarity. In a nutshell, that is our introduction of the listening subtest. In our future videos, we're going to talk about the 3 stages per section. Number 2, the format. How are you supposed to write the answers in the listening subtest? We're going to talk about the tips and how to deal with different types of questions, namely gap fill, multiple choice. Hopefully, you were able to get something from the last few minutes that we've been together. Let's now move on to our next video.